Welcome to the tutorial about how to use Grasshopper Code Comparator. The goal of this tool is that you can visually compare different versions of the Grasshopper definition with this web tool here. It started as an experiment and now it's a sloppy implementation, but that nevertheless you can use right now, and I also hosted it on the web app. I'm gonna have that check it out soon so you can straight jump into it. What I'm gonna focus on this tutorial is the features of the web app here, and also how to supply your own data with a couple of Grasshopper snippets that are part of this repository. You can also download this repository and run the whole thing on your local machine, or upload it and create your own instance on render.com or similar hosting deployment services. That's up to you. But right now, we're gonna jump into this Grasshopper Code Comparator app. Click this link here. We're gonna be sent over to this website here. And this is essentially the interface. On the left-hand side, we have some document stats, computation time, and then how many components we have in version A and version B. I called them current for the latest version and previous for the previous version, so there's some order in there. Starting points, endpoints, that is, if components have no incoming connections, we say that's a starting point, and if they don't have any outgoing connections, that's an endpoint. Then in the middle here, we have right now the split view. On the left-hand side, we have current graph, version A, and then the previous graph, version B, and graph refers to Grasshopper definition. You see these both viewports are synced. So here we see kind of the same definition in a different state. There's some color coding. Components that were added in the version are highlighted in green. Components that were removed are highlighted in red. And then we also have blue for where attributes have been changed, and purple if the component just have been moved in location, moved to a different position. We can zoom in and then we see kind of the information, the names of components and inputs being shown there. You can hover over the objects and see some more information. If objects have been changed, you kind of see a bit how the attributes were before and after, and so on and so forth. Now, you can make a selection. You see it's synced to both canvases here. And then there are some selection tools on the top right. We can kind of traverse the computation graph back and forth, and then also update the selections to kind of get into selected components, connected components, which might be useful if you think, okay, this component was deleted, and now I really want to select all the components that are affected by that, right? That still exist and used to be connected to the deleted component. And this is a way kind of to manage this. Right now we jumped to those. Then there's a method using Speckle to sync the selections back to Grasshopper. We're gonna cover that in a bit. Next to the split view, we have a morph view, where we have one unified canvas, and we can transition from one graph version to the other. Have a look. And back. So this is kind of nice to visually develop an understanding what changed from one version to the other. What happens here, we start with the previous graph, all in gray, and then we transition into highlighting changes. This uses the same color coding we discussed before, and then we kind of implement and show the movement of objects, and finally we transition back to the new version of the graph. And these are pretty much the features of this little web app. Now here's an important settings button. If you want to use your own data, this is where you want to go. There are two ways to do that. You can fetch data from Speckle or upload JSONs you export using a Grasshopper snippet that we're going to have a look at in a second. We start with the JSON mode, and then I'll show you how to set up Speckle and all these options over here. So, well, let's get started. I want to go back to this repository and quickly download the Grasshopper snippets.gh, because this is something we know we're going to need in a bit. So I download it here, and we have it somewhere here. Let's jump to my Grasshopper definition. This is, let's say this is a Grasshopper definition I want to work on a bit, but kind of keep track of changes. I think version control in Grasshopper is a big problem, and that's kind of the reason why I made this tool, to make it a bit more easy, perhaps. So this is my Grasshopper definition about language models, large language models in Grasshopper. And I have that in version 1. So the first thing I want to do is kind of create the data I can use in my dashboard. For that, we need this Grasshopper snippet we just downloaded. I'm going to open it here, and this is how it looks like. This is kind of the whole thing, including an example logic, which we don't need. So if you want to use create data that you can use in this dashboard, you need to kind of copy-paste this snippet into your main definition. So I go back here, and I just paste it on the top outside the main area, so it's clearly separated. And here we go. If you do not want to use Speckle, this part is not relevant for you, but only these two. Now let's discuss quickly what happens. I click this button here. This will take, in this case, half a second. For bigger files, might take a bit longer, because in the background, the Python code iterates through a document and creates a dictionary and then a JSON that represents the whole Grasshopper definition into that file format. What's important, clusters, the content of clusters is not supported right now. That's a bit of a tricky one. There are also some OpenAI, ChatGPT gimmicks here, but we do not really cover that right now because that's not the main point. So here we kind of parse the definition and generate stuff. And by the way, you also have a visualization of the definition here in Grasshopper geometry, just as a side note. But what's more important is we save this JSON to disk in this section, and by default it's saved to the same directory as your Grasshopper definition is saved. Here, GH projects, you see now we have a graph JSON here next to our LLM in GH version 1. Pretty nice. Now let's make some adjustments in this file. Let's say we have some outdated code here, so we can delete that immediately. We can also maybe rethink our parametric model, which lives over here, to kind of maybe create 2 separate sliders instead of so I'm just doing some really random stuff here. We move a few objects here and here. And now I can save that as version 2. Right now, I would also need to kind of just quickly indicate the graph that this was version 1. And now I regenerate the graph here for this version 2. Now, usually you would want to kind of maintain these kind of things through stuff like GitHub, right? That when you have a new version, you make a new commit, so you don't have to manually rename things, or use Speckle instead. We're going to cover that in a bit. For now, I just quickly do this manually here. So now we have 2 JSONs, right? This is all we need. I can go back to the website. I just reopen it. And now we have to upload. We can upload the 2 JSONs we created here. The current graph, which in our case would be version 2. And then the older version, the previous graph, which is version 1. I selected these files, and then I hit Generate Graph. And we see quite fast, we have now the representation of our Grasshopper file in this web app interface. Right? We can hover here, okay, they got removed. Here we see the objects were mostly shifted a bit, but also here we have kind of 2 objects that were disconnected, right, before they had the connection. And then we also see 2 number sliders that have been added in the latest version and reconnected here. If you go to more view, you get the same, kind of have this nice interface to immediately see, for maybe an outside person, to see where and what was changed. Great. Now let's use the Speckle version of this, which has some advantages. First of all, we can sync these. If we make a selection here, for instance, we can sync that back to Grasshopper. And also it's a way of version control. Like, you don't want to save your JSON files and then rename them all the time, but you just want to keep them somewhere online, and Speckle is a service where you can exactly do that. So let's go. we go to the Speckle website here. I create a new stream. I call it code GH graph, because we're gonna create a graph JSON from the Grasshopper definition. We have a new stream. Now I create a branch. We can also use the main one, but I'm going to create one. One is here where we store the JSON. So I'm going to call it graph versions. It's also called definition versions. That really doesn't matter. And then I create another one. We're going to come to that in a bit. That I will call UUID sync. Now we're gonna sync the components back and forth. But let's go with this one first. Now let me just open two windows here and go back to this component. We go here to Speckle, and we need a few things. You probably need the Speckle token, and this one you can set here. You go to your settings. Now you go to your account profile. Then you go to new token in profile settings, and we give it a name, code comparator test scope. In our case is we need to write and also read, not profile but stream read. Yeah, I think that should do it. That's the access rights. And then we do save. Now you have the token here. You will only see it once, so you have to kind of save it somewhere, and I will paste it here. That's our Speckle token. I go back to our stream, and now we have to give this input field the Speckle stream ID, and this is something you find on top of here in the URL if you are kind of in your stream. Paste it here, and then we need the branch name, which we set to graph versions. Now, commit UUIDs. This is something you can use alternatively. By default, otherwise, we're going to take the latest and the commit before the latest one. But you see in a bit, if you send our JSON to this branch here, we're going to see each time we send it, it's creating a commit, and then it has its unique ID. So this side is set up successfully for now. We can close it, and now we need to do something in Grasshopper as well. I go back to our Grasshopper screen here, and we simply have to provide here in our snippet where we want to send the data from Grasshopper. So I put the URL from our Speckle stream branch here, so we have kind of stream ID, branches, and then the name of the branch, right? And now, if I hit send, we're gonna send the version of this JSON straight to Speckle, and you see here we already have a commit. And Speckle looks like this. Because we don't have geometry data, you won't see anything in this 3D viewport, but if you go to this data view, you have the data structure here, and now here essentially we stored a JSON string in this main graph section. And this is something our web app can then read. Now, we created just one commit. We need another one, so we have something to compare. So let's again change something. Let's say we do not want this snippet that says something about explain what's on the screen, so we can remove it. And maybe we say, actually, it was nice to have these two sliders here. This 2D slider here. Let's put it back, remove those guys, and recreate the JSON. And then also hit send. Now you can also set that to automatically send. So you could have some setup where this kind of stuff is triggered more automatically. So whenever you make a change, this whole section here triggers and sends new data to the cloud. Look quickly on Speckle, and we go back to the branch. Now we have two commits here. And now I go back to our web app and hit generate graph. So now we have the updated version straight from Speckle. You see this is something we deleted here. In the more view, we can do the same again. You see here was something we deleted, while the bottom here we added something, or something was actually shifted and also here deleted. All right, now let's say we want to sync some of our selections here back to Grasshopper. You remember we already set up a graph, a branch that was called UUID sync. And this is the one we're going to use to kind of sync the IDs of the selected objects here, the selected nodes or components, back to Grasshopper using Speckle again as a kind of intermediate step, because it's quite easy to do that. And it can also trigger Grasshopper automatically because Speckle implemented webhooks in their document, in their components. So again, here we have to provide the stream ID and then the branch name. Here we agree to UUID sync, add it here. Now in Grasshopper, we need to go back to our Grasshopper snippets definition that you downloaded from GitHub. And we have these two snippets at the bottom here that take care of the syncing of IDs. I'm going to paste them as well. Let's put them just here, also on the top of this definition. What we need to do is to provide the same branch, the URL to the same branch. So I go back here, I paste it in here. So we have like stream URL, UUID, and then we have UUID sync as a branch. And let's see if that works. So I go back to our app. And now I select, let's say, one of the components here, the deleted component, the two deleted components, and I want to kind of select all the downstream components here. I add selection, and now I say push selected. And if everything works, we should see the object selected on Grasshopper screen, and you see it actually happened, right? Now we forwarded the selection from the web app straight to Grasshopper. And it works the other way around as well. If let's make this random viewport smaller, don't really need it. If I select, let's say, this whole section here, and I hit on sync dashboard component selection send, so I send the selected objects from Grasshopper, they should pop up in a bit here in my web app when I hit fetch selected. And what's also interesting, this can work with if you have multiple Grasshopper, the different versions of the definition open at the same time. Let's just get it in the same way. Now we can also paste the same sync selection snippet to this older version here. And what happens now is that both of those listen to these changes, which can open quite interesting workflows. And if this would be worked a bit more further, maybe even kind of to merge different versions, this could be kind of a nice assistant tool for these kind of things. So let's try it again. I'm gonna just click here on a few objects. I make a few more selections, add to selection, and then I push selected. And in a few seconds, we should see this popping up in both of these Grasshopper files. And you see that worked, right? This is kind of interesting, right? We could go to an old version, select to the newest version, select the added objects in this window, hit copy, and then go to the older or maybe the main version of the definition and paste them straight there. And here have some ideas where we have to double check potential connections, so everything still works, right? More like in a workflow where multiple people work on one file, and you use this tool to make merging kind of developments on the same file, from the same file to the main file back a bit easier.